Admiral Jake Morrison walked into the huge meeting room where all the alien leaders sat. The room was bigger than a football stadium and filled with creatures from across the galaxy. Some looked like giant bugs with sharp teeth. Others were made of living crystal that sparkled in the light. There were robot-like beings with glowing red eyes and tall aliens with too many arms. Jake wore his best Navy uniform, but he felt small compared to these powerful beings. Captain Lisa Hayes walked beside him. She had been chosen for this mission because she was one of Earth's best pilots. Behind them came Lieutenant Commander Rick Davis, who knew more about alien technology than anyone else on Earth. The aliens were already talking about Earth before the humans even reached their seats. They spoke in different languages, but the translation devices let everyone understand each other. "Look at them," said a tall blue alien with 4 eyes. "They think they can help us fight the Void Swarm." "Humans are so young," laughed another alien that looked like a walking tree. "They just learned how to travel between stars 50 years ago." The leader of the meeting was Council Prime Vextar. He was the scariest alien Jake had ever seen. Vextar had 6 eyes arranged in 2 rows on his face. His skin was gray and covered in scales. When he spoke, his voice sounded like thunder. "So," Vextar said, looking down at the humans, "Earth wants to join our war against the Void Swarm. Tell us, Admiral Morrison, what can your primitive world offer?" Jake stood up straight. He had practiced this speech many times. "Earth has 12 warships ready for battle. We have brave crews and new ideas for fighting." The room exploded with laughter. The crystal aliens made sounds like wind chimes. The bug creatures clicked their jaws together. Even the serious robot aliens made electronic beeping sounds that meant they were amused. 12 ships, said Admiral Zekthul, an alien whose ship was alive and could heal itself. "We have thousands of vessels. Each one is more advanced than anything your species has ever built. Your ships don't even have proper energy shields," added Commander Wylix, whose people could control gravity with their minds. "We've seen your technology. You still use chemical rockets and metal bullets." Lisa Hayes felt her face turn red with anger, but she kept quiet. She knew getting mad would only make things worse. "We understand our ships look simple," Jake said, calmly. "But sometimes simple works better than complex." This made the aliens laugh even harder. A snake-like creature with dozens of arms slapped the table with all of them at once. "Simple? You mean primitive. Your weapons are hundreds of years behind ours." Vextar held up one of his clawed hands for silence. "Very well, humans. We will allow you to join our fleet, but you will stay in the back where it's safe. Leave the real fighting to species who know what they're doing." "Your ships can carry supplies," said another alien leader. "That's about all they're good for." Jake wanted to argue, but he knew it wouldn't help. Earth needed this alliance. The Void Swarm was coming whether the aliens helped or not. At least, this way, humanity would have a chance to learn and maybe survive. "We accept those terms," Jake said. As the meeting continued, the aliens talked about their amazing weapons. The Zeltharians could create black holes with their crystal ships. The Carvex had fighters that moved faster than light. The Andromedans grew their ships like plants and could make new ones during battle. Each species tried to impress the others with stories of their victories. They had defeated pirates, rebels, and monsters from dark space. Their technology was so advanced it seemed like magic to humans. "The Void Swarm has never faced anything like our combined fleet," boasted Vextar. "They are just animals. Dangerous animals, but still just beasts driven by hunger." "Our energy weapons will cut through them like paper," said the crystal alien. "They won't know what hit them." During all this bragging, the humans sat quietly and listened. Rick Davis took notes on a simple paper tablet. Some aliens noticed this and found it funny that humans still used such old-fashioned tools. "Look," whispered one alien to another. "They write on dead trees. How quaint." When the meeting finally ended, the aliens began to leave. Most of them ignored the humans completely. A few gave them looks that seemed to say, "Try not to get in our way." Jake, Lisa, and Rick walked out of the Great Hall together. They said nothing until they were back on their small transport ship. "Well, that went about as expected," Lisa said once they were alone. They think we're jokes, Rick added. Did you see how they looked at us? Jake smiled for the first time that day. Let them think that. Sometimes it's better when your enemies underestimate you. These aren't our enemies, Lisa pointed out. No, Jake agreed. But they're not really our friends either. They're using us. The question is, can we use them back? Rick looked at his notes. They told us a lot about their weapons and tactics, maybe more than they meant to. Exactly, Jake said. They're so confident they didn't bother hiding anything. That might be useful later. The transport ship began its journey back to, Earth's small fleet. As they traveled, Jake thought about what he had seen. The aliens were powerful, no doubt about that. Their ships were incredible, and their weapons could destroy planets. But Jake had been a soldier for 20 years before he became an admiral. He had fought in wars where the enemy had better equipment, more soldiers, and superior technology. Sometimes the side that looked weaker on paper won because they were willing to do things their enemies wouldn't expect. Admiral, Lisa said, do you really think our 12 ships can make a difference? Jake looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, the void swarm was coming. The aliens called them monsters, but Jake knew monsters could be killed if you found the right way to do it. Lisa, he said, those aliens have spent so long being superior that they've forgotten what it means to really fight. They think war is about having the best toys. And what do you think war is about? Rick asked. Jake's smile grew wider. War is about winning, and humans have always been very good at finding ways to win. 3 days before the big battle, all the alien ships gathered in the Nexus system. Jake Morrison had never seen anything like it. Thousands of incredible vessels filled the space around him. Each one was a work of art and deadly technology combined. The Zeltharian ships looked like floating cathedrals made of pure crystal. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Light bent around them in strange ways, and Jake knew they could create gravity wells that would crush any normal ship. The Carvex fleet moved like a living thing. Their ships were dark and covered in what looked like armor plating. Smaller fighter craft swarmed around the bigger vessels like angry bees around their hive. Jake counted at least 10,000 of the small fighters. The Andromedan bioships were the strangest of all. They actually were alive, grown instead of built. These ships could heal themselves if they got damaged. Some of them had tentacles that moved slowly through space. Others looked like giant sea creatures with glowing spots along their sides. In the middle of all this magnificence sat Earth's small fleet. 12 ships that looked like metal boxes compared to the flowing organic designs around them. The USS Defiance was the biggest, but even it seemed tiny next to the alien dreadnoughts. Captain Lisa Hayes stood on the bridge of the Defiance, looking out at the alien fleet. They really don't think much of us, do they? Commander Amy Bennett was working at her engineering station. She had been modifying human ships for 3 years, ever since Earth first learned about the void swarm. Let them think that, she said without looking up. We've got surprises they can't imagine. Chief Engineer Paul Mitchell climbed up from the lower decks. His uniform was covered in grease and his hands were dirty from working on the engines. Amy, the new systems are ready. All ships report green across the board. What new systems? Asked Lieutenant Nina Clark. She was young and had only been on the Defiance for 6 months. This was her first real battle. Amy smiled but didn't answer directly. Nina, run a diagnostic on our kinetic barriers. Make sure they're holding at full power. Kinetic barriers? Nina looked confused. I thought we didn't have any barrier technology. We don't have energy barriers like the aliens, Paul explained. But we came up with something different, something they wouldn't expect. On the other side of the fleet, Admiral Zekthul was meeting with the other alien commanders. His bioship's main conference room was grown from living coral that changed colors as he spoke. The battle plan is simple, Zekthul explained to his officers. We'll engage the void swarm at maximum range with our energy weapons. The crystal, ships will use gravity manipulation to break up their formations. The Carvex fighters will handle any that get through. What about the humans? asked Commander Yilix, whose gravity control ship floated nearby. Zekthul's tentacles curled in what his species used for shrugging. Put them in the rear. They can provide support fire if needed. Mostly they should stay out of the way. None of the alien commanders bothered to study Earth's ship designs or ask about human tactics. Why would they? The human vessels looked primitive and simple. No fancy energy weapons, no living hulls, no gravity manipulation, just metal boxes with chemical rockets. Back on the Defiance, Jake Morrison was holding his own meeting with the human captains. Each of Earth's 12 ships had their commander present via video link. Remember, Jake said, they expect us to hang back and shoot from long range. We're going to let them think that's exactly what we're doing. Captain Ben Rogers of the USS Vengeance nodded. My crew is ready, Admiral. We've been practicing the new maneuvers for months. Good. What about weapon status? Commander Kate Sullivan answered from the USS Relentless. Railguns are charged and ready. Kinetic penetrators are loaded. Point defense systems are online. Excellent. And the special packages? Amy Bennett spoke up from her station. All ships have their surprise packages installed and tested. The aliens won't know what hit them. Nina Clark was getting more curious, by the minute. Commander Bennett, what exactly are these surprise packages? Amy looked at Jake, who nodded permission to explain. Nina, every other species in this fleet fights the same way. They use energy weapons, shields, and long-range tactics. They've been doing it for thousands of years. So the Void Swarm has been fighting them just as long. The swarm creatures have learned to adapt to energy weapons and shield technology, but they've never fought humans before. Paul Mitchell grinned. We don't use energy weapons as our main armament. We use kinetic weapons, solid metal moving very fast. The swarm can adapt to lasers and plasma beams, Amy continued. But you can't adapt to a chunk of tungsten moving at 30,000 miles per hour. Physics is physics. Jake Morrison watched the alien fleet positioning itself for battle. Each species took their traditional place in the formation. The crystal ships in front for long-range bombardment, the bioships in the middle for command and control, the hive ships spread out for fighter deployment. Sir, Lisa Hayes said, incoming message from Admiral Zekthul. Put him through. The alien commander's image appeared on the main screen. His tentacles were moving, and what Jake had learned meant he was feeling superior. Admiral Morrison, Zekthul said, please position your vessels behind our main battle line. Try to avoid interfering with our targeting systems. Understood, Admiral. We'll stay out of your way. After the communication ended, Rick Davis shook his head. They really think we're just going to sit back and watch. That's the idea, Jake replied. Rick, what's our intelligence on the Void Swarm? Rick pulled up his files. They're definitely biological, but enhanced somehow. They adapt quickly to whatever weapons are used against them. Energy weapons become less effective over time. Shield. Frequencies get analyzed and bypassed. But they've never faced kinetic weapons in large numbers, Amy added. Right. And there's something else? Rick continued. The swarm creatures are designed to board enemy ships. Every species they've fought before relies on energy barriers to keep boarders out. Jake nodded. And we don't have energy barriers. No, sir. We have something better. We have doors, locks, and humans with guns. Nina Clark was starting to understand. The swarm expects to find aliens who fight from a distance with technology. Instead, they'll find humans who fight up close, with simple weapons. Exactly, Paul said. They can adapt to a plasma rifle, but a good old-fashioned shotgun is going to work the same way every time. The final preparations continued through the day. Human engineers made last-minute adjustments to systems the aliens had never seen before. Explosive reactive armor was installed on the outside of every human ship. If something hit the hull, the armor would explode outward, hopefully damaging whatever caused the impact. Inside the ships, human crew members prepared for close combat. They carried weapons that fired solid bullets instead of energy beams. They had grenades, knives, and tools for fighting in narrow hallways. Most importantly, they had trained for this exact situation. While the aliens prepared for a clean, long-range battle, the humans prepared for war the way their species had always fought, up close. personal, and dirty. As the day ended, Jake Morrison looked out at the alien fleet one more time. Tomorrow, they would face the Void Swarm. The aliens were confident their superior technology would win the day. Jake wasn't worried about superior technology. He was counting on superior tactics, human stubbornness, and the element of surprise. "Get some rest, everyone," he announced over the ship's communication system. "Tomorrow we show the galaxy what humans can do." The attack started without warning. One moment space was empty except for the Allied fleet. The next moment, it was full of nightmares. The Void Swarm came out of dark space like a plague of locusts. Millions of black shapes poured into the Nexus system. Each creature was the size of a small ship, but they moved like living things instead of machines. Nina Clark stared at her sensors in horror. "Admiral, I'm reading over 3 million individual contacts. They just keep coming." Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance watching the enemy approach. The swarm creatures looked like a cross between sharks and spiders. They had long, tooth-filled mouths and multiple arms ending in sharp claws. Their skin was black and seemed to absorb light. "All ships, this is Admiral Zekthul," came the transmission from the alien commander. "Engage at maximum range. Do not let them get close." The alien fleet opened fire first. The crystal ships of the Zeltharians created gravity wells that crushed dozens of swarm creatures at once. The bioships of the Andromedans shot streams of living plasma that burned through enemy formations. The Carvex released clouds of fighter craft that swarmed toward the invaders. For a few minutes, it looked like the aliens would win easily. Their weapons were incredibly powerful. Each shot destroyed multiple enemies. The swarm creatures seemed helpless against such advanced technology. But then something changed. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Commander Rick Davis from his station, "the alien weapons are becoming less effective. The swarm is adapting." Jake watched the battle unfold on the main screen. The gravity weapons that had crushed so many enemies at first were now barely slowing them down. The plasma beams that had burned through their ranks were being absorbed or deflected. "How is that possible?" Nina asked. Amy Bennett looked up from her engineering console. "The swarm creatures are biological, but they're also smart. Their bodies are changing to resist the weapons being used against them." On Admiral Zekthul's bioship, panic was starting to set in. His tentacles writhed with stress as he watched his most powerful weapons become useless. "Impossible," he said to his officers. "No creature can adapt this quickly to our technology." "Sir," reported his science officer, "the swarm creatures are sharing information somehow. When one learns to resist our weapons, they all learn." The rainbow crystal ships tried changing their gravity frequency, but the swarm adapted to that too. The plasma beams were adjusted to different energy levels, but the creatures developed resistance faster than the aliens could modify their weapons. Worse yet, the sheer number of enemies was overwhelming. Even when the alien weapons worked perfectly, there were always more swarm creatures to replace the ones that were destroyed. "We need the reserve fleets," Zekthul transmitted to the other commanders. "Where are our reinforcements?" Council Prime Vextar's voice crackled over the communication. "System. They are still 3 hours away. We must hold the line until they arrive." 3 hours? Commander Ilix's gravity ship was already taking damage from swarm creatures that had gotten through the defensive fire. "We might not last 3 minutes at this rate." The Carvex fighters were being overwhelmed. For every swarm creature they destroyed, 5 more attacked their small ships. The insect-like pilots were brave, but they were fighting a losing battle. In the rear of the formation, the human fleet watched and waited. Jake Morrison studied the battle carefully, taking notes on everything he saw. "Sir," Lisa Hayes said from the captain's chair, "shouldn't we be helping them?" "Not yet," Jake replied calmly. "We need to see everything the swarm can do before we commit our forces." "But the aliens are losing," Nina protested. "People are dying out there. And if we attack now without understanding our enemy, we'll die too," Jake said firmly. "Then nobody wins." Rick Davis was tracking the swarm's adaptation patterns on his computers. "Admiral, I'm seeing something interesting. The creatures adapt to energy-based attacks very quickly, But they haven't faced any kinetic weapons yet. Good. What else? They're using swarming tactics, overwhelming numbers instead of individual skill. But their formations are predictable, Amy. Bennett nodded. Perfect for what we've got planned. The alien left flank was starting to collapse. A group of Zeltharian crystal ships had been surrounded by swarm creatures that were no longer affected by gravity manipulation. The beautiful crystal vessels were being torn apart by claws and teeth. "This is Commander Zix of the Crystal Fleet," came a desperate transmission. "We need immediate assistance. Our weapons are completely ineffective." Admiral Zekthol tried to send help, but his own bioships were under attack. The swarm creatures had learned to resist plasma weapons and were now attaching themselves directly to the living hulls. The bioships screamed in pain as they were eaten alive. "All ships, retreat to secondary positions," Zekthul ordered. "Reform the battle line." But there was nowhere to retreat to. The swarm was everywhere, adapting to every weapon the aliens used. Their numbers seemed endless, and their ability to share defensive information made them nearly invincible. On the Yar, Defiance, Jake Morrison watched 3 more alien ships get destroyed. The crews tried to evacuate in escape pods, but most of the pods were caught by swarm creatures before they could reach safety. "Sir," Paul Mitchell called from engineering. "All human ships report ready for combat. Kinetic barriers are at full power. Explosive reactive armor is armed. Weapons status: railguns charged and loaded with tungsten penetrators. Point defense systems online. Close combat teams are armed and ready." Jake nodded. The time was almost right, but not quite yet. He needed the swarm to commit fully to their current tactics before revealing humanity's surprises. "Admiral," Nina said urgently, "the Carvex flagship is in trouble." On the main screen, they could see the massive hive ship surrounded by thousands of swarm creatures. The aliens' fighter craft had been overwhelmed, and now the creatures were attaching themselves to the main vessel. "They're boarding the ship," Rick reported. "The Carvex don't have any close combat defenses." That was the difference between humans and aliens, Jake realized. The aliens had developed such advanced technology that they had forgotten how to fight simple, dirty battles. They expected their energy shields and long-range weapons to keep enemies at a distance, but the swarm creatures didn't care about distance. They wanted to get close, to board ships and fight with claws and teeth. That was exactly the kind of battle humans understood better than anyone. "All ships," Jake announced on the human fleet frequency. "Prepare for Protocol Nemesis. Wait for high signal." The alien fleet was in full retreat now, but the swarm was following them. Soon there would be nowhere left to run. The creatures had adapted to every weapon the aliens possessed, and their numbers seemed to grow larger by the minute. Jake Morrison smiled grimly as he watched the approaching swarm. The aliens had laughed at Earth's primitive fleet. They were about to learn why humans had survived and thrived on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. "Signal coming in from Admiral Zekthul," Lisa reported. "Put him through." The alien commander's image appeared on screen. His tentacles were moving frantically, and his bioship showed severe damage in the background. "Admiral Morrison," Zekthul said desperately, "we need your help. Our weapons are useless against these creatures." Jake looked at the swarm approaching, his position. Millions of hungry, adaptive monsters that had defeated the most advanced fleet in the galaxy. "Don't worry, Admiral," Jake said calmly. "We've got this." Jake Morrison took a deep breath and gave the order that would change everything. "All ships execute Protocol Nemesis. Show them what humans do when we fight for real." The transformation was immediate and shocking. Earth's 12 ships suddenly moved in ways that made the alien commanders stare in disbelief. The USS Defiance shot forward like a bullet, followed closely by the other human vessels. "Impossible," whispered Admiral Zekthul from his damaged bioship. Those engines shouldn't be capable of that kind of acceleration. But the engines weren't the real surprise. As the human ships closed in on the swarm, their true nature was revealed. These weren't just ships built to look intimidating. They were weapons platforms designed around one simple idea. If you can't out-tech your enemy, hit them harder than they can hit you. The USS Defiance opened fire first. Instead of energy beams or plasma bursts, It shot solid metal rods at incredible speed. The tungsten penetrators punched through swarm creatures like bullets through paper. The creatures tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. Metal moving fast was just metal moving fast. Direct hits on target formations, Nina Clark reported with excitement in her voice. The swarm creatures can't counter pure kinetic force. Captain Lisa Hayes coordinated the attack from her command chair. All ships focus fire on their cluster formations. Don't give them time to spread out. The human fleet moved like a pack of wolves. While the alien ships had fought individually, each showing off their advanced technology, the humans fought as a team. They covered each other, shared targets, and moved with deadly coordination. Commander Amy Bennett watched her engineering displays with satisfaction. Kinetic barriers holding steady. The swarm's weapons can't penetrate our defenses. The kinetic barriers were humanity's answer to energy shields. Instead of deflecting energy beams, they were designed to absorb and redirect physical impacts. When swarm creatures tried to ram the human ships, the barriers spread the force across the entire hull. But the real shock came when the first swarm creatures managed to attach themselves to human vessels. Every alien ship had been torn apart when this happened. The creatures would eat through the hull and slaughter the crew inside. The USS Vengeance was the first human ship to be boarded. Captain Ben Rogers watched dozens of swarm creatures break through his outer hull and pour into the ship's corridors. Boarding parties have breached decks 3 and 4, his security chief reported. They're heading for the bridge. Let them come, Rogers replied calmly. All crews to combat stations. Show these things how humans fight when we're angry. The swarm creatures had evolved to fight aliens who relied on energy weapons and technology. They expected to find crew members hiding behind force fields, shooting laser pistols from a safe distance. Instead, they found Commander Sam Rodriguez and his Marine squad waiting in the main corridor with weapons that fired solid bullets. The creatures had never seen anything like it. Welcome aboard, Sam said as he opened fire with his assault rifle. Hope you don't mind the noise. The swarm creatures tried to adapt to the gunfire, but their biology couldn't change fast enough. A bullet was just a piece of metal moving very fast. There was no energy signature to analyze, no technology to counter. It was pure, simple physics. They can't adapt to this, one of Sam's Marines shouted over the gunfire. It's too basic for them to understand. The creatures tried to rush the humans, but they ran into another surprise. Every human ship had been designed for close combat. The corridors were narrow with corners and barriers that favored defenders. There were blast doors that could seal off sections of the ship and hidden weapons in the walls. On the bridge of the Defiance, Jake Morrison watched his fleet tear through the swarm like they were made of paper. The human ships used tactics that no alien would have thought of. They rammed straight through enemy formations, their reinforced hulls crushing creatures while point defense turrets cleared away the debris. USS Retribution is using harpoon tactics, Rick Davis reported. They're firing magnetic cables to drag enemies into kill zones. Excellent. What about the Relentless? They've deployed a minefield of micro-explosives. The swarm is flying right into it. The human weapons were devastatingly effective because they were so simple. While aliens had spent thousands of years perfecting energy weapons and shields, humans had focused on making things that hit hard and broke stuff. The railguns fired tungsten rods at 30,000 miles per hour. The point defense system shot thousands of small bullets that created walls of deadly metal. The explosive, reactive armor turned every hit into a counterattack. But most importantly, the human crews fought with a determination that the swarm had never encountered. When creatures boarded their ships, the humans didn't retreat or panic. They fought back with guns, knives, and their bare hands if necessary. This is impossible, Admiral Zek Thule said as he watched the battle. How are they winning with such primitive weapons? Council Prime Vextar's crystal form flickered with newfound respect. They're not primitive. They're specialized. Look at how they fight. The human ships moved through the swarm like sharks through a school of fish. They didn't try to fight from a distance like the aliens. They got close, used their superior armor to absorb damage, and hit back with weapons that couldn't be countered. The USS Defiance led a charge straight through the largest cluster of swarm creatures. Its hull was covered in explosive reactive armor that detonated when creatures tried to claw through it. Each explosion sent chunks of metal flying in all directions, killing even more enemies. "Hull breach on Deck 7, Paul Mitchell reported. "Reactive armor is doing its job." "Boarding parties?" Lisa Hayes asked. "Handled," came the reply from the ship's security team. "These things don't know how to fight humans." The tide of battle was turning. The swarm creatures that had adapted so quickly to alien technology found themselves helpless against human tactics. They couldn't adapt to bullets because bullets were too simple. They couldn't counter explosives because explosives just made big booms. Most importantly, they couldn't understand human psychology. The aliens had retreated when their technology failed. Humans got angry and fought harder. "All ships converge on the swarm's command cluster," Jake ordered. "Time to cut off the head of this snake." The human fleet moved with deadly precision. Their ships looked crude compared to the elegant alien vessels, but they were built for one purpose: winning fights. Every system, every weapon, every piece of armor was designed to destroy enemies and protect the crew. As the humans approached the largest concentration of swarm creatures, the aliens watched in amazement. These primitive humans with their simple weapons were doing what the most advanced fleet in the galaxy couldn't do. "Sir," Nina Clark said with wonder in her voice, "we're actually winning." Jake Morrison smiled as he watched his ships perform exactly as designed. "Nina, this is what humans do best. We find problems and we solve them, usually with something that goes boom." The swarm creatures tried one last desperate attack, throwing everything they had at the approaching human fleet. But it was too late. They had spent all their energy adapting to alien weapons, and now they faced something completely different. Something simple, brutal, and effective. Something human. The final assault began as the human fleet carved a path directly toward the heart of the swarm. The USS Defiance led the charge, its hull scarred but unbroken. Behind it, 11 other human ships followed in perfect formation, their weapons firing continuously. The swarm's command cluster was a massive collection of the largest creatures, each one the size of a space station. These were the brains of the operation, directing the millions of smaller creatures in their attacks. If the humans could destroy them, the entire swarm would lose coordination. "Target the big ones first," Jake Morrison ordered from the bridge of the Defiance. "Take out their leaders and the rest will fall apart." The human ships opened fire with everything they had. Railguns launched tungsten penetrators that punched holes clean through the command creatures. Missile pods released clouds of explosive warheads that detonated in chain reactions. Point defense systems created barriers of deadly metal that shredded anything that got too close. The command creatures tried to fight back, but their weapons were designed to work against alien technology. They shot streams of acidic bioplasma that would have melted through energy shields. But the human ships didn't have energy shields. They had thick metal armor that simply absorbed the acid and kept going. "Their weapons aren't working against our hull plating," Amy Bennett reported from her engineering station. "The acid is eating through the outer layer, but we've got 6 more layers underneath." "That's the idea," Paul Mitchell said with a grin. "Let them waste their energy on our armor while we tear them apart." The USS Vengeance broke away from the main formation and attacked a command creature from the side. Captain Ben Rogers had loaded his ship with specially designed kinetic harpoons. These weren't just weapons, they were tools for ship-to-ship combat that the aliens had never imagined. "Fire harpoons," Rogers ordered. "Drag that thing into our kill zone." The magnetic harpoons shot out and embedded themselves in the command. Creatures hide. Then the Vengeance used its engines to pull the massive beast toward a cluster of floating mines that the humans had deployed earlier. The explosion was visible from across the battlefield. The command creature disintegrated in a ball of fire and metal fragments. Thousands of smaller swarm creatures suddenly stopped moving, their connection to their leader severed. "That's how it's done," Rogers announced over the communication channel. "1 down, 6 to go." The other human ships copied the tactic. The USS Relentless used its railguns to pin a command creature in place, while the USS Retribution moved in for a close-range attack. The Retribution's captain had armed his ship with something the aliens thought was impossible: nuclear missiles. Nuclear weapons in space combat? Admiral Zekthul said in disbelief as he watched from his damaged bioship. That's insane. No, Council Prime Vextar corrected him, his crystal form pulsing with understanding. That's human. The nuclear missile struck the command creature dead center. The explosion vaporized the target and sent shockwaves through the surrounding swarm formations. More creatures stopped moving as their command structure collapsed. Meanwhile, the boarding battles continued on several human ships. The swarm creatures that had managed to get inside found themselves fighting an enemy they couldn't understand or defeat. On the USS Defiance, Commander Sam Rodriguez led his Marines through the ship's corridors, hunting down the remaining boarders. The creatures were lost and confused in the narrow passages, unable to use their usual swarming tactics. These things don't know how to fight in enclosed spaces, Sam reported to the bridge. They're used to open battle where they can surround their enemies. Keep hunting them down, Jake replied. Don't let any escape. The Marines moved through, the ship with military precision. They used grenades to clear out large groups of creatures and shotguns to handle anything that got too close. The swarm creatures tried to adapt, but there was nothing to adapt to. A shotgun blast was just metal pellets moving very fast. As the command creatures fell one by one, the rest of the swarm began to lose coordination. The smaller creatures started attacking each other, confused without their leaders to guide them. Some tried to retreat, but the human ships pursued them relentlessly. This is incredible, Nina Clark said as she watched her sensors. The entire swarm is falling apart. That's what happens when you cut off the head, Lisa Hayes replied. Humans learned that lesson a long time ago. The battle was effectively over, but the humans didn't stop fighting until every last command creature was destroyed. They had come too far and lost too much to leave any of the leaders alive. The USS Defiance fired the final shot of the battle, a tungsten penetrator that punched through the last command creature's brain. As the massive beast died, the remaining millions of swarm creatures suddenly became mindless, drifting through space without purpose. All targets eliminated, Rick Davis reported. The swarm is completely disorganized. Jake Morrison looked around, at his battered but victorious fleet. All 12 human ships were still operational, though several showed heavy damage. Not a single ship had been lost, and casualties were minimal. All ships, this is Admiral Morrison, he announced. Mission accomplished. The Void Swarm is defeated. Across the battlefield, the alien survivors watched in stunned silence. Their magnificent fleets lay in ruins, destroyed by an enemy that their technology couldn't handle. But Earth's primitive ships had not only survived, they had won. Admiral Zekthul was the first to respond. His bioship was badly damaged, but he managed to send a transmission to the human fleet. Admiral Morrison, he said, his voice filled with respect and amazement. How did you do it? How did your primitive weapons succeed where our advanced technology failed? Jake smiled as he looked out at the debris field that had once been the most dangerous threat in the galaxy. Admiral, our weapons aren't primitive. They're practical. We built them to solve a specific problem. But energy weapons are more advanced than kinetic weapons. Zekthul protested. Advanced doesn't always mean better, Jake explained. The swarm could adapt to your energy weapons because they were complex. Our weapons are simple. A bullet is a bullet. An explosion is an explosion. There's nothing to adapt to. Council Prime Vextar's transmission came through next. Admiral Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally apologize for our earlier dismissal of your fleet. Your species has proven that wisdom often comes in unexpected forms. Apology accepted, Jake replied. Just remember this lesson for next time. What lesson? Vextar asked. Never underestimate someone just because their tools look different from yours. Humans don't build ships to impress people. We build them to win. As the rescue operations began, the alien survivors got their first close look at human ship design. What they saw amazed them even more. Every system on the human vessels was designed for one purpose: fighting and winning battles. There were no luxury quarters, no artistic decorations, no wasted space. Everything was functional, practical, and deadly. The ships were built by a species that understood war at a fundamental level. "Look at this," one alien engineer said as he examined the Defiance's armor plating. 6 layers of different materials, each designed to counter a specific type of attack. "This is brilliant." "And look at their weapons," another added. "So simple, but so effective. They don't try to do everything. They just do one thing very well." As news of the victory spread across the galaxy, the story became legend. The day that Earth's tiny fleet defeated the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever known. The day that humans proved that sometimes the best technology is the simplest technology. Jake Morrison received messages from across the galaxy, congratulating Earth on its victory. But the message that meant the most came from his own crew. "Admiral," Lisa Hayes said as they prepared to return home, "do you think they'll still laugh at our ships?" Jake looked out at the alien fleet, many of its ships barely functional after the battle. Then he looked at his own 12 vessels, battered but victorious. "Let them laugh if they want," he said. "We'll be too busy keeping them alive to care." The return journey to Earth was quiet. The humans had proven themselves, but they took no joy in the destruction they had caused. They had done what was necessary to protect innocent lives. Nothing more. As they traveled through space, a new saying began to spread among the alien species. Never underestimate a human fleet. They don't build ships to look pretty. They build solutions. The galaxy had learned an important lesson that day. Sometimes the most effective answer to a complex problem is a simple one. And when it came to finding simple, effective solutions to impossible problems, humans were the best in the galaxy.